conference here. So this will be maximized. Okay. I think see, till today's or till yesterday's session, right? People have been working with text analytics, right? Classification, RNA sessions, right? Succeeded my earlier morning session on decision trees, classification measures, all this stuff. I do have one what the material on base to be covered. I think that can follow this clustering session, right? Because the first the focus be on the breadth or the variety, and then maybe towards the end I'll walk through the Bayesian classifier. Right? Now, why am I keen on getting it covered? Because I think somewhere in yesterday's session, Mukesh was using a multinomial classifier, right? Bayesian multinomial classifier, he told, right? But at least the basics for all that, right? It's actually coming in from your Bayes theorem of statistics, probability, right? Basic comes from the Bayes theorem. And in some occasions, right, the Bayes classifier is also good. Right? After this, I'll get it done, and be Santosh will address this next session on social media analytics. Right? Okay, the data clustering, right? But I'm getting started with clustering, right, so that you don't miss out on the data. So data clustering, right, is essentially viewed as a unsupervised learning mechanism. Right? I think by now the audience, right, should be comfortable with the usage of the words supervised and unsupervised, right? If you have a training data set, if you have somebody to teach you how to learn, that is what we call as supervised learning, right? Or this is what this is the way I call, right. Supervised learning is referred as learning versus or learning from examples, while unsupervised is viewed as learning from observations, right? That the examples is what we call as training data set or your historical data set, history, right? Some past should be available, right? But in some real life scenarios, right, you may not have the luxury of always having a training data set. You have only one overall data, right? You can't call it training, you call it testing. There is one data set I have, right? And I need some patterns from that as well. That is what we call as unsupervised learning. Or can you do some learning from the current observations only? I hope people are differentiating the word example and observation, right? So example means past records where the knowledge or data knowledge relationship is available. Can you name one learning from examples technique in data mining? The question is clear. Learning from examples, what would you identify as one data mining technique for learning from examples? So data classification here, right? Because you had a training data, correct. You had a training phase and a testing phase. I think there are some textbooks which we explicitly call it as a training phase and a testing phase, right? I have intentionally avoided, right? I did give you this 80-20 split, right? I hope now the chart is pretty helpful, right? 80-20 split, I said, right? And 80% of the training data records you use it for regressions, excellent. 80% of records you use it for training phase, 20% you will use it for testing phase, we said. But I think you extend the literature, right? You will also see this ratio of 60-20-20, right? Where they say 60% of the records I will use it for training, 20% I'll reserve it for last testing, and this 20 balance 20%, right? I will use it for what is called the validation phase, right? To test it, if there is misclassification, then use additional 20 to adjust the training model, right? But I think that was you possibly an incremental knowledge which you can pick it up, right? But you should be aware of these words at least. Training is true, testing is true, validation, right? I think you will have support for that in Python as well, right? Maybe the afternoon session, maybe I'll ask him to show at least how validation works. This session is unmolated. Fine. At least the objective of clustering is almost stark apart, right? If you look at it comparing from classification point of view, right? The classification exercise, right? We are actually interested in assigning class labels to each individual test record, right? Now the objective is actually the opposite. With the clustering setup, I want to group related records together. Right? How do I group it? I don't have any past history available. I have to look at some statistical features in the data. That is what I call as observations. Okay, right? So group related records into one cluster. And I think I've also seen people who even use this word cluster as a class. You eventually can write, but the ideal word is group. I hope people are getting it. It's 100 records I have in my data set. Do some statistical grouping, right? I ensure that you will end up finally with two groups, three partitions, or something like that, right? So each partition, each group is what we call as a cluster. Okay. So in your market basket analysis, right, which we saw it as a case for association tool mining, right? You had this luxury of the past data, then learn some rules, and then use it to apply it for a future scenario reserve, right? Let's say we don't have any past history. I just have new purchases coming in, right? There is no past history at all. Then I would like to view the can I group customers who exhibit same buying patterns, right? I hope people are getting it. This is what the industry calls as customer segmentation, right? So clustering finds application all such scenarios, right? That's what I'm calling it. Learning from raw data as opposed to a training data. And I think this chart you have, right, the graph you have there, right? So it's basically a 2D representation or a 2D data set I have, right? So I plot X versus Y, and then I think it goes without saying, right? The way the eye picks it up or the way the human eye will view this grouping exercise, three clusters you look at, right? Points which are near to one another, adjacency, property, right? So this is one good example that what we generally go in for giving a visual approach to clustering, right? But I think what is the focus of my session at least, can there be a formal algorithmic approach to do data clustering, right? And two key, I hope the definition of clustering is clear, right? The process of grouping a set of objects or a set of records into one class, two class, whatever you call it, they refer it as a clustering. Right? So that is why I view it as an opposite to classification here, right? See, in classification, the focus is on individual records, right? Assign class label to each individual record. Now the class label and all is not there. Can I start merging records? I hope people are getting it. Merging records in the context of place them into one common basket. One is an example I give, right? Okay, just for your better understanding, you can view your original data set as one full cluster. Sub clusters, right? There are different approaches, part testing, hierarchical, we'll get in there, right? At least the interpretation, the difference between classification and clustering, that should sit in there. Okay. Next, right? What are the key properties that a clustering algorithm or a clustering strategy generally works with, right? Documents or records, right? I think in a search context, we call it document. In your database context, you can call it records, right? The beauty about clustering, it finds varied applications from searching to into image segmentation to marks everywhere it finds. So I think possibly the third or fourth slide should talk on that. Okay. The key properties, right? This is what I call as intra and inter-cluster similarity. Okay. The first property to be satisfied is a clustering algorithm will always focus on maximizing intra-cluster similarity. What does that mean? Records that you place within one group, they should exhibit the highest similarity. Correct, right? You want it to be belonging to the same group, right? Let's say students. One more classical example that I give for clustering is your relative grading exercise if you do, right? I think the faculty audience, right? You'll be, we should be conversant to this relative grading exercise, right? So how do we do? Absolute grading, you make it with Excel formula that I agree. Relative grading, what do you do actually? Arrive at the total of 100. That's what I actually follow, right? Do a descending order sort, which means what? And then look for gaps, right? 100 to 80 marks are there. Then the next mark is 76, right? 76 to 60. I hope people are getting the live example I'm giving in, right? That is nothing but a application of clustering only, right? So I hope the pitch for clustering is clear, right? So intra-cluster similarity should be really high or maximize intra-cluster similarity and also ensure that you will minimize the inter-cluster similarity. Two objective measures of interest. Records within the same cluster should strike high similarity levels and records across clusters. What do I mean? Let's say two clusters I have, two records I take from these different clusters, their similarity should be the minimal possible. I hope people are getting it. Otherwise, if that is also high, then it means it should be actually a candidate of one of them, right? Either cluster one or cluster two, right? So I think this is the real basis of clustering. All algorithms which came up later, right? They all still work with this larger objective of maximizing intra and minimizing inter-cluster similarity. Next. This is the classical applications of clustering, which I said. Okay, right? I will not follow an order so that you get the image segmentation exercise, right? What does that mean? Given an image, identify the edges, identify this normalization required for the clustering, right? See, normalization, right? Data cleaning, right? All that is typically viewed as scaling, typically viewed as a what a pre-processing step, right? So I think we don't take a call as normalization is explicitly required for clustering. Normally, if you feel the data set is skewed, right, the knowledge that is learned may not cover the generic pattern requirements, then maybe you will have to normalize it. Right? But I see it as normalization, not an exclusive requirement for clustering, maybe for classification, even for association rules. Normalization, my sincere request is to view it as a pre-processing approach. The records are really what widely distributed so that I'll scale it down to a range 0 to 1 or some other application specific range. Excellent, valid question, right? So that I think the larger essence is, I think Vedant should have talked about this mean, median, mode and all, right? And then if noisy records come, the mean gets shifted starkly, whereas median, I hope that is aware, right? Mean is more prone to outliers than median. I hope that fact was pitched across. I think you would have done surely, right? See, let's say you have 10 records or 10 values. You have taken the mean. And suddenly you get, let's say that those values are in the range of 10 to 100, right? And suddenly you get a new record saying that 10,000. Record or data point is 10,000, right? Now, if you take the median, median is a start shifter, right? So why am I saying, right? Mean, median, and all are heavily used in the data mining algorithms. The interpretation is median is more robust to outliers. Okay, right? So if you do normalization, then you're not bothered about all that. But if you're not doing that, then maybe you'll have to look at using the right measure. Median, medioid, mode, right? Good, excellent. Taruka Prasad, valid question. Good, right? So stepping on, I think customer segmentation you understood, right? Grouping related set of customers into one cluster, right? Why should I do a clustering of customers? Okay, I'll pitch this question. Your cell phone subscription plans that you get, right? I think I'll be the best example to give who recharges once in 6 months, no use of SMS, nothing of that sort, fine, right? But then you have this modern generation who keep SMSing, texting, and all, right? Based on your, let's say I don't have this past history also, right? So then based on, right, your age group, so all that stuff, they may go in for offering different packages for different age ranges, right? So that I'll view it as a customer segmentation approach. Okay, right? So customer segmentation, image segmentation. I hope people are. I think image is order of the day, right? Image or video is order of the day. A video is nothing but a sequence of images played at a faster rate. The eye cannot distinguish the that what is it called visual perception difference, right? Image segmentation. I hope people are connecting it, right? So objects in the image, right? This is the blue portion. This blue typically means sky, right? And then the greenery portion is all. So what am I meaning? Grouping related pixels together, right? All green colored pixels, all blue colored pixels. It is a table out there which is a brown colored pixel. Image segmentation algorithms. I don't know whether I think you people have been using it. Image segmentation might be without appreciating that the underlying most of the successful image segmentation algorithms of the recent years, right? They heavily employ clustering there because there it is viewed as a grouping of related pixels together, right? Recommender systems. That's what I said, right? Your plan for cell phones and all, right? And just to wind up with one more application. Next one. Next slide. Okay, I think this material I saw in the Stanford material, yes, Stanford material or some good universities online material, right? Yahoo, right, earlier possibly maintained this sort of hierarchy to maximize the search. Pages related to agriculture, pages related to biology, physics, CS, space, right? And then in computer science, you have the sub-labels of A, HCA courses, right? If you go bottom up, right, then with this classification, but if you come top down, what am I connecting this diagram as? The input is a set of all URLs on the web or pages on the web, right? And I don't have any expert and all, right? I want a machine to automatically group agriculture pages together, biology pages together, physics pages together, CS pages together, right? Similarly, in computer science, group all AI pages together, data structures pages. I hope the example is kicking in, right? The applications of clustering is really far and wide yet, right? How does it do statistical properties? Because I don't have the past to guide, I have to look at the current. And what may be the benefit of a search engine actually trying to use Google actually uses? Okay. Can you foresee, is there any benefit of using clustering in a search process? Why should a search engine? Because straight away it can go compare it and then give, right? Why? Or is there any benefit that I may get out of clustering pages and then allowing a search? Just to improve my accuracy, right? The moment I have grouped my data properly, then based on the query, right, I will just keep searching only in the CS pages. Let's say you are a computer science student or a CS faculty. Your search interests are likely to hover around A, HCA and all, right? So your queries, right, they will straight away switch into the computer science pages search. I hope people are getting it. The benefit I get out after clustering pages and then allowing a search, right? It means it will improve my precision rate, my recall rate, my overall F1 score, all that stuff. Okay, right? Next slide here. Cluster hypothesis I told, right? Maximize the cluster similarity, minimize. This is what I told you. Query matches. The other application of grouping of 1 minute. Okay. The other application of grouping of documents on the web, right? It can be that the user may be searching with not all the possible terms, right? I think similar pages. Google does this, right? The what is that? Your auto prediction of the query, auto completion of the query, and then the did you mean this? That's not just syntactic. To some amount of semantics also they look at, right? How is that internally happening, right? They do have some good clustering mechanism inside, so that even if a user searches for the car, right, it may even bring in words or what pages from automobile related or something better than automobile, maybe what's it called, SUV cars, right? All that stuff, right? Okay, just to wind up my application touch, you can go to the next slide. I think it is the different types of algorithms. Right? Before I start on the technique, because application focus is really first of all. Okay, just one question out of interest I asked, right? Do you use the Google search engine, right, or any search engine you can take? But I really vouch for Google. Okay, I don't get paid anything, but the beauty about their design, the beauty about their efficiency of algorithms, excellent it is. Okay, right? The design shortly I'll mention it. Can you relate any data mining technique which you have seen so far with respect to Google? I just said clustering. Avoid that. Is there any other data mining technique? Because clustering, if they choose to use, they can use. Otherwise, also searching will work, right? So clustering is not a paramount what connotation for Google. Is there any other data mining technique which you can relate with Google? I hope the question is clear. See, if you focus on the user search query, right? Finally, you get some pages returned, right? As far as user is concerned, or as far as the search process is concerned, these are the only two results of interest. Either a page is relevant or a page is irrelevant, right? So now, given that clue, any guesses? All web pages in the the World Wide Web or on the net, which are being searched by Google, eventually has to be dashed as relevant or irrelevant. It's a binary classifier here. No, and I think you that this is what my approach is. Google is nothing excellent here. Google is nothing but a binary classifier with the only possible results of interest being relevant or irrelevant. And your whole focus on the what underlying algorithm is, can I improve the relevancy return and reduce the irrelevancy return? Yeah. And then how do they manipulate internally, right? They have, I think people will be aware surely. They have a page ranking algorithm, right? Which keeps dynamically adjusting based on the number of hits, right? And why is it called a page rank algorithm? What gets ranked? Web pages, right? It's a matrix which will assign important values for web pages based on past access. And maybe it is dynamic also. It is not static. But any idea why is it called page rank algorithm? Incidentally, it ranks web pages, but that is not the reason why it is called the page rank. The page rank algorithm is actually a contribution of Larry Page of Google. He actually invented the first page ranking algorithm. Then you have several variants, much more efficient are there. Just for the interested audience, there is also one more excellent page rank algorithm by I can't cover it. It is called as its hyperlink induced topic search by Naren Ramakrishnan, who's another famous data mining scientist. Right? Later you can search, right, so that it helps out in the research context. Fine. Right. Coming back, I think you have seen a spectrum of clustering, and because I thought I should tell this classification Google example, I generally pitch it, but somehow I forgot it in the earlier session. Forgot it, or I think time was running out, right? And going there. Fine. Right? Clustering algorithms, right, in general, right, they are actually viewed, there are categories they are grouped into, right? They are, to start with, we will see what is called as a partitioning approach to clustering, right? There is a partitioning. First one, right? The partitioning approach to clustering. Then you'll also have one category of algorithms called hierarchical, which actually view it as a grouping mechanism internally. Right? It's a hierarchical. Then there is something called as density-based clustering, grid-based clustering. The list is large. Agglomerative, divisive, right? But Python will support a host, and I think the GitHub repositories, you will get even much more efficient implementations. But this session, we will restrict our discussion to one example of a partitioning algorithm and one example of a hierarchical one, right? So that you get the underlying basics, because that's still used prevalently, and that was the real. K means is like the a priori here. You may have several efficient algorithms that has come, but a priori is still widely used in some contexts, right? Similarly, K means is the mother of clustering algorithms. Okay, right? And I think for hierarchical, we will see one name as some techniques. Hierarchical, if I am correctly calling the names, Clarence and Diana, I think, because the names are interesting to remember, right? Clarence means Diana. Clustering based on agglomerative strategy, and Diana means divisive analysis. Agglomerative. What is agglomeration and divisive? You will shortly understand here, right? Agglomeration, meaning of the word agglomeration is merge, right? A divisive, you know, it is split. So both ways we can get done grouping. Okay, next. So I'll start with the partitioning approach, right? The famous K-means. So the word gives it, right? Okay, can you name one partitioning approach which you have already been exposed to in the previous sessions? Partitioning approach to mining. When will you drop this habit of asking questions? No, don't. I know it is a fellow audience, right? Or maybe even serious colleagues. But I think that is just to make both people, right? It is not a robot teaching a robot, right? Excellent. Yeah. Decision tree, the classifier, what? That was your decision tree was a partitioning approach to. Excellent. Who was it? Absolutely great. Decision tree was a partitioning tree approach to classification. Similarly, clustering or K-means is also a partitioning approach to uh, classification or your clustering setup. Okay. K means, what does a K mean? K is a number of clusters here, right? That's an application specific measure. You can set it to 2, 3. If I set K to 1, that's as good as not clustering at all. Then the data set is viewed as one cluster. Okay, right? So K you can vary, right? Optimal value of K, that is all a trial based exercise, and some mathematical solutions also there. But I think for this example, which I do, let's keep K as 2. So initially I set the number of clusters as 2, K is equal to 2, right? And I am actually taking a simple 2D data set, 2 dimensions, A and B, or maybe points, 1, 1, 1.52, like that. So I think we'll keep coming back to this data set. And this is 7 documents. Okay, next. I hope the data set comes back again. Okay, right? So what is the first step of clustering? You have identified that I want to group the entire data set into 2 groups. Cluster 1, cluster 2, group 1, group 2, like that. Now, the next major step is identify a center for a cluster, or identify centers for each cluster, or typically in the data mining community, they call this term as cluster centroids. They want to differentiate it from these cluster. What center is typically a circle word, right? So they want to the centroid, a central representative of a cluster or a representative of the cluster is what is called as a centroid. So what do I do? Group 1 and group 2, right? Uh, at random, choose 2 elements, 2 data points from your data set to act as a centers, right? I am choosing 1 and 4. 1 goes saying the first record I see is 1 center, but a more decent guided approach could be go there earlier. The data set here. Let's say 1 I choose at randomly, right? The first record will be my 1 center. You can choose anything, 7, 3, 2, that's up to you. But a decent or a better guided choice can be the next center that you choose, because you have only 2 groups, right? The next centroid can be that element which is at the maximum distance from the earlier center. Distance, I hope K nearest neighbors was covered, right? We will stick on to the basic Euclidean distance which was taught to us in I don't know whether 8th standard or 10th standard, right? Root of x2 minus x1 the whole square plus y2 minus y1 the whole square is Euclidean distance. There are plenty of distance metrics here, right? Euclidean distance is 1, Manhattan distance is 1, right? Minkowski distance is 1, right? And no, I think that's the word distance kicks in, right? Most of the clustering algorithms in this process of identifying whether it is similar or not will be heavily requiring what distance computation will come, right? I think at least in the courses I do, right, this similarity matrix itself is a separate lecture. I will share that slide with you, right? There are plenty of similarity metrics in the literature here. How do I handle documents which are actually containing text, right? That becomes, I think you can treat it as a separate discussion on, or 2 3 sessions on similarity metrics. I will pass on that slide, right, so that people who are working on clustering, they can use different measures, right? Good. So at least we will stick on to the basic. I hope people are getting this word similarity measure, right? How do I say whether two records are similar or not? I will have to measure some amount of distance between them. That is what that measure is called as a similarity metric or similarity score, similarity measure. Cosine similarity is heavily used in searching context. Right? Good. We will stick on to the basic one of Euclidean because it's numerical. Right? Good. I hope people are clear. Why am I choosing 4? If you compute the Euclidean distance between of 1 with every other pair, 1 with 2, 1 with 3, 1 with 4, like that, the maximum distance I get out is with the 4th record. Why should I choose for maximum and not minimum distance? Why should I choose my maximum deviation? In this case, I mean this. I think the next cluster centroid I choose, right? I don't want it to be something which is similar to cluster 1, right? I wanted a real, starkly different point. You can do randomly, then your clustering may require several reruns, right? Convergence will be slow, all those issues will come, right? That is why we recommend this next subsequent centroid should be far apart. Okay, right? Next. I hope people have understood. The distance between the 4th point and the 1st point is the maximum. So let the 4th data point act as a next cluster center, right? And this theory is what I have told in the slides here. Good. Next. This is a trace of k-means, right? I think k-means is, I think, we have been doing it in grading without even noticing it, right? So let's say you have 2 columns of groups of cluster 1 and cluster 2. The first element, right? I'm actually now doing the clustering process. The first record I take, which is a value 1 1, that is anyway the center, right? So don't bother about it. And the right side pair, I hope my mouse is visible or Santosh can point. Right? The 4th record becomes the cluster 2. So that is the starting state of the clustering algorithm. Okay. Second record I get is 1.2 and 1.5. Now, what should I do? My simple similarity metric I will use is k-means, or what is that? Euclidean distance, right? 1.2, 1.5, measure its Euclidean distance with respect to the earlier centroid of 1, 1 and 5, 7. Right? I think even you can use absolute distance. That is what we call Manhattan and Minkowski distance. But Euclidean distance, right? The square factor, all that stuff will help us. Okay, right? So 1.2, 1 point. I hope people are getting it. 1.2, 1.5 data point I get. Where should I put it? Measure the distance between the 1 1 center and 5 7 center. Right? This case, should I look for the maximization or minimization? Place it in the group where it is close. Right? Are people getting it? Fine, right? So 1.2, 1.5, the distance is much more closer to cluster 1 center than my cluster 2 center of 4. Right? This is 1 point, the distance with 4 will be more, whereas the distance between 1 will be less, right? So place, I hope people are getting it. Put 1.2, 1.5 into cluster 1, right? So the second step, right? The right side, there is no change. Cluster 2 still has only 1 element, no update, right? Okay, 1 minute, Santosh. I think I took the second data point as wrong here. Go there. The data set. I'm sorry for that. 1 minute. The second value is actually 1.5, 2 here, right? You actually have to measure the distance of 1.5, 2 with respect to 1, 1 and 5, 7. And then you will conclude that it is close to cluster 1. So you will place it in cluster 1. Now the cluster is a collection of 2 records. Update their centroids as mean of the data points. Okay. Are people getting it? Right. So now the 2 cluster elements in the cluster 1 are 1 and 1.5 comma 2. Right. So take the mean means what? 1 plus 1.5 by 2, 1 plus 2 by 2. That how am I getting 1.2 and 1.5? It is mean of the x values and the corresponding y values of the data elements in that cluster. As the class understood the centroid update step. I will wait. I'm really happy to see people are noting down. Right. Very good. Deepa, madam. Excellent. I'm waiting basically so that I allow you to digest because she wants to write down, right? And I'm not going to wait for eternity, right? But have you understood the step of centroid updation is very important. Why? Because as I keep adding more elements into one cluster, right? The center cannot be the old center, right? It has to reflect the constant learning process. See, the rest of the trace is iterative. That is the benefit in computer science. If you understand the trace, the rest of it you can actually kick forward, right? Have you understood the cluster update step? Cluster update meaning centroid update. Why did the cluster centroid of cluster 1 shift from 1.1 to 1.2, 1.5? Has that been understood or not? Somebody can ping me. So this is the problem of having somebody who teaches 3 courses a semester, right? We don't come out of that mode. Is the class clear? Why did I shift the cluster center from 1.1 to 1.2, 1.5? This 1.2, 1.5 is not data point. What was the data point here? Second data point I got is 1.5 and 2 here, right? You compare whether this 1.52 is it close to C1 or C2 by measuring the Euclidean distance, and having concluded it is closer to C1, right? You place it in C1, right? So C1 is cluster 1, I mean. So 1, 2, C1 is composed of 2 elements. Now take their averages. What are the 2 elements? 1, 1 and 1.52. Okay. Do it slowly. 1 plus 1.5, comma, what was the other point? 1 plus 2. This is a sum. No, no, no. There. Centroid. Next. Right. Point at the first 2 centroids, Santosh. Right. 1 and 1.2, 1.5. Right. That average I will take here. 2.2. Right. And then, oh no. 2.5 by 2, comma, 3 by 2. 2.5 by 2 is approximately 1.25, right? Let's say I do a what is it called as truncation. I am interested only in the digit precision, right? 1.25 is rounded off as 1.2. 3 by 2 is 1.5. Has the class understood, or has the audience understood the centroid updates? Because that is very critical. Rest of it is just iteration. Can I move on? I'm expecting a ping back. Good, right? So till the second step, no change on the second cluster, friend. Third point, can I Santosh quickly earlier point so that 3, 4, 5 star. Okay, next. Okay, the next data point was 3, 4, right? 3, 4 will again be more closer to which center will you compare now? 3, 4 point is more closer to 1.2, 1.5 than 5, 7. Okay, right, by you will have to compute the Euclidean distance of 3, 4 with my new centroid 1.2, 1.5 and the other old centroid of 5, 7, right? The smaller the distance. That is why I am grouping the third record, Santosh individual. The third record is being grouped along into cluster 1. 3 records are getting updated. Now add all their coordinate data points and then divide it by 3 because it is 3 data points. Arrive at the mean of it. Okay. Are people getting it? One, see the centroid of 2 is still the same. Centroid of 1 is, the more the clustering you do in 1, the centroid will shift. Okay. 3, 4, 5, 7 was the next data point if I remember right. Correct. 5, 7, right? Santosh, that data set next to 2, 3 records we'll see. Data set 5, 7, 3, 5, 3.5 and 5. Next go there. 3.55. Go there. 5, 7, there's no point in looking at it because that was the center, right? Anyway, it will go to 4. Okay. So that is why I skipped to 4. The fifth data point, right? 3.5 and 5. 3.5 and 5. If you measure the distance, it will be more smaller or closer with respect to the 5, 7 centroid than your 1.8, 2.3. So that is why I am putting the fifth data point into cluster 2. And what should I do? Can somebody ping that? Because you added one more data element into the cluster to update that centroid, which is 5, 7 plus 3.5 plus 5, right? 5, 7 is 1 point, and the 3.5, 5 is the other point in 3.5. I'm sorry for that typo. So 5 plus 3.5, 8.5 by 2, 8.5 by 2 is what I think 4.2 something, right? Similarly, 7 plus 5 by 2 is 6, right? So this is the essence of K means keep iterating, right? Next element, the sixth record you take, right? That will again be more closer to the second cluster. So I'm putting it as 4, 5, 6 in one group and then shift the centroid to 4.3, 5.7. And then the seventh record also the distance happens to be closer to cluster 2, right? So eventually the final grouping, if you see, this is the output, the bottom table. 1, 2, 3, their center, the final cluster center is 1.2, 2.3, 1.8, 2.3, and the cluster 2 centroid is 4.1 and 5.4. Have people understood the basic trace of K means? Of course, you can go to the next slide, but I'll wait for the ping from them. Is the basic trace of K means clear? Because now I'm going to talk about convergence, optimality, quality, all that stuff. But the basic trace should be clear. Okay, I'm assuming it is clear because the pinging is not happening. Okay. Right? But this clustering process which you saw, right, it is highly subjective, right? The moment you vary the K, 3, 5, you will get a different result. And it is also subjective where? On the choice of the centroid that you started. Instead of 1 and 7, what was 1 and 4, what will happen if I choose 1, 2, right? So it means you can have differing results, right? In fact, I think you have what is called this elbow approach to K means, right, which actually will look for the right value of K so that the elbow shape comes in clustering, right? Try it for varied values of K so that the clusters exhibit an elbow shape, right? But even this basic clustering which you did can be fine-tuned for better quality and better results, right? That's what I'm doing here, right? Now what you do after having done that clustering, take all the records and then compute their distance with respect to each of the final centroids. First data point with respect to centroid for C1, the distance comes out as 1.5. I hope people are getting it because the centroids are updated after having seen the entire data set, right? What is this table about? The Euclidean distance between each data point and its respective centroid, right? So the first individual, the distance with this final centroid of C1 is 1.5. Similarly, with the center C2 centroid is 5.4. Like that you do. I don't want to waste time in the simple calculation here. Okay. Repeat all this. Why should I do this? Right? If you do like this, right, what is the result you are getting? That is of interest to observe. So the first data point is more closer to cluster 1 than cluster 4, right? Because the distance is high, 5.4 you get. Sir, what is this? Anyway, you only put it into cluster. That's not the essence, sir. Why am I doing it? I am doing it this checking process post a global update, right? Are you getting it? So even after you push it into cluster 1, the other data points would have come and pushed the cluster centroid, right? So if there was some slip, right, you do one more rerun to find the quality of the cluster, right? But in this case, 1 still happens to be close to cluster 1, so no change. Data point 2 you take. Distances with respect to the centroids are 0.4 and 4.3. So 2 is still closer only to cluster 1. So it can still remain there. The third one you take. See here. 4, 5, 6, 7, right? I still get as the correct answer. C2 is the correct answer. Third data point, if you check, right? The new distance I get with respect to the new centroid I have is 2.1, whereas its difference from cluster 2 is 1.8. So what does it mean? The third data point after your global update somewhere happens to be close to your second cluster. Next slide. See, what am I doing here? I think the explanation I've given here. I am changing my earlier clustering result. I am moving away 3 from cluster 1 to cluster 2. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is for cluster quality improvement or better convergence. And then because I shifted this, the centroid will change. Is a class understanding the requirement for this global cluster adjustment for better quality. Next slide. I will wait on it. Next slide. Did you people understand why should I do that final check? Okay, just for your own better understanding, I'll give this into 1.5. Let's say these are some data points. So one dimensional, I mean, one x is it's just one dimensional, 1, 2, 5, 8, 10. Let's say these are student marks out of 20, let's say, right? And then suddenly one value comes 20, right? I think people who do this relative distribution in grading, right? We follow a normal distribution, bell-shaped curve, for which the central point is mean, right? The problem with mean is, right, it is highly susceptible to noise. Right? So let's say if it is a noise record, 100, 10,000, that large values come, the mean gets shifted drastically. Correct, right? For the 3, 8, 16, 26 by 5, around 5. For the first data set, right? Mean of this is around 5 years. The moment you add a 20 plus 26 will be 46, 46 by 6 will be 8. 6 8 are 48 later on. If you add a new data point called 20 to an earlier one, then the mean shifts to 8. And the whole k-means algorithm is revolving around the means, right? K-means. Good. Excellent. That is what we call as noisy record, right? But that's what, if you view it as a noise, then you can Padmachak, valid question, excellent. You can ignore it if you are treating it as a noise. But let's say out of 100 records, I'm having 30 records such as that are noisy. Right? Or if you the way you call it noisy, then it means that noise itself can be a cluster, right? Correct, right? So that is why we do this next step approach of if a noisy record came in, so that I will update it accordingly. You saw a simple example with 2. This update over n clusters, right, will really adjust the noises better, right? But still, k-means is not. If your data is really noisy, then density approach, hierarchical, they are much better. Okay, but for paucity of time, I will not go there, right? At least hierarchical, I wish to complete and then go to. Is the class compatible with k-means? I do have my material on k-meteoroids. I'll share it. Right, meteoroids you can understand here. It is at Minkowski distance I will work with. Okay, right. At least k-means and hierarchical. I want you to be sound. Okay. So one. Okay, why is it called as a partitioning approach? You started with the K original data set and you partitioned it into 2 clusters, right? Or 3 clusters, 4 clusters, whatever you do. Now the exact opposite we will do, right? Or what we call as hierarchical methods can either be agglomerative or divisive. Agglomerative means merging and divisive is splitting. Right? I'll quickly, I think this theory, right? Merging is, I give you the essence behind it. If you have 10 records in a, okay, just to make sure that audience is clear, I am moving out from K means I'm moving into hierarchical clustering. Okay. If you have 10 data points in your cluster, right? The initial assumption is each record itself is a, what is one problem of K means you're fixing a value of K which is random, right? And the what you have to do it for iteratively for many Ks and then choose the best result, too tedious, right? Don't fix the value of K, let's evolve K dynamically. So let 10 records, let them become a cluster themselves. This is at the bottommost level. Each record, each data point itself is a cluster. Then start merging. The two most closest, right? Pick up the two most closest, the most similar, merge. Repeat this process. This is called agglomerative. And this I call as bottom up in a tree notion. Okay. The exact opposite approach is also there, right? Where you will view the entire data set as one cluster and then, right, move one which is at the maximum difference from the others, that is called splitting, divisive. You can either merge from the bottom up fashion or you can divide from a top down fashion, right? Division is move away. I hope people are getting it. Move away one record which is really far away from the others. Repeat this process. That's the essence of a divisive approach. Keep merging similar records, keep moving up the tree. That is the essence of your agglomerative approach, right? I think now we get the point. Okay. The agglomerative algorithm is called as AGNES, agglomerative nesting, and divisive approach. The name is cyanide is famous, right? And next year, I think they've got the basic theory of clustering. Okay, right? I think this was an excellent trace which I found in one university source again. Okay. Now I am not giving you any data points and all. Okay, right? You even if you have a data point, you can still set up this matrix. This is what we call as the distance matrix here, right? So 5 data points I have, 5 records I have. Okay, right? So what is this matrix? For downloading Java, should I create login? Maybe my volunteers, Java volunteers, you can help them. Downloading Java, why do you need a login? I don't think you. But I don't know whether they are giving it, supplying it locally. Okay, I think the class Sasikala, maybe some of the TAs will help out. Okay. Why are you bothered about Java in a clustering session? I'm not able to comprehend. Fine. Don't be disturbed about Java here, right? I still vouch for C and C++. Okay. 5 data points I have, right? What you do, compute the similarity matrix. This is what I've got. What does it mean? Distance between 1 is 0, right? That is this is what. Okay, just to, out of curiosity to test, 1 is 0, 2 the diagonal elements. Then I understand for that class. Okay, whoever is the Santosh, whoever is the lab TA, you just ask Sasikala can ping your email ID here. You ask the lab TA to get in touch on email. Okay. I think if I recall well, it is Anmol and team, Akash, I think. Good. Or even some third year students, right? Sanjeev Murthy and all, they are excellent with that. Okay. Right. Okay. The diagonal, this is the distance matrix here. Okay. Why should the diagonal elements always be populated with 0? Okay, just I'll ask a question in a different way. What is this property in discrete mathematics notions? Distance, if you view it as a function, distance function is always reflexive, right? Distance with respect to itself will always be 0, right? And distance function is also symmetric. What does it mean? D of ij is equal to D of ji, right? So that is a property I'm using, and that is why I'm not populating the upper triangular matrix. That can be what filled up by symmetric. Just it's almost like the mirror image of this, right? Are people with me on this? I measure the distance between one to two diagonal elements will always be 0. The second record and the first record, the distance is 9, right? 2, 3, I'm not doing. Why am I not doing? I'll get it from 3, 2. Are people clear with this notation? What does the entry in 3, 1 mean? I took the third data point and I took the first data point. I measured the equivalent distance between them. That equivalent distance is 3. Third and second data point I took, I measured the equivalent distance. That distance is 7. Right? If 3, 2 is 7, 2, 3 will also be 7. Santosh can point there. You are asking me to contact the TA. How will I point it? Symmetricity here, right? 3, 2 if it is available, or if you want to populate the upper triangular, then shift it to the lower triangular. Right? Is the class clear with the distance notation used in this similar? This is called a similarity matrix. I will wait for a ping because there's no point in rushing through. It looks like a syllabus covering exercise. We don't have a syllabus given by some next university to cover, right? At least that liberty I have. Is this because this distance matrix is very critical to even all other clustering algorithms which you will pick up in the Python packages? Is a notion of a similarity matrix, some of the mathematical properties like symmetricity, reflexity, right? Is that clear? Eighty people are there. Then I know age factor is against. I think some names just to recall: Ahuja Madam, right? Mukesh Gar. Ahuja, I remember from yesterday's session. Joseph, I remember, right? Somebody can bring me there. And there was one GMIT, right? Educational Enterprise GMIT login. Are people, because I think there is no point in going into agglomeration if this itself is wavering. Are people clear with this distance notation or distance matrix? You are forcing me to do the worst thing, right? Pinpoint people. Okay. Archana. Archana is there. Vivek Chaudhary is there.
Yes, sir.
Dintu Joseph.
Clear,
Joseph is
sir.
there. Yeah, yeah, good. Okay, fine.
Yeah, it's clear, sir.
Very good. Thank you. Moving further, right? So what is the step? This distance matrix is computed. I want to merge them, right? So what you do, identify the smallest distance element, right? So that is what that square is denoting, right? So what does that mean? Among the 5 data points I had, 3, 5 are the most closest. Their distances are small compared to all other pairs you can look at, right? So 3, 5 will be now merged and made one cluster, and the rest will be kept separate. So what are the others? If 3, 5 becomes 1, 1 to 4 are separate for me, right? Santosh, can you go to the next slide? We'll have to come back again, but we have to go. So look at the similarity matrix, right? You will update your similarity because the third and fifth element are now overall one element for you, right? So that is why I'm making as 3, 5 as one data point together, 3, 5 as one data point together here. Left out data points are 1 to 4, 1 to 4. Okay. Now your issue will be, how do I compute the distance between, let's say I take this 3, 5, 3, 5 is 0, yeah, given. Santosh, you have to point 3, 5, 3, 5 is 0. Okay. How do I compute the distance between one with a merged cluster 3, 5, right? Go to the earlier slide. I think these explanations I'm giving it, but I quickly, you can read it later. Okay. What are the points of interest? 1 and 3, 5, right? Distance of 1, 3. Look at this. distance of the first point with respect to 3, distance of the first point with respect to 5. That is what I've written here. D of 1 comma 3 is equal to 3, and is there in the text. Last bullet. D of 1 comma 3 is 3, and D of 1 comma 5 is 11. Right? This is what we call as complete link approach to hierarchical clustering. Right? Choose the maximum one so that you cover all spectrum ends. Right? So 11 is a maximum. Right? Come there. That is why I populate this distance as 11. Are you getting it? Sir, you are not doing it for 3, 5 with 1. That is symmetricity, right? You can replicate the reflection property or symmetric. Reflection is different from reflexive. Okay. Reflection is mirror image or symmetric property. Okay. Right? So I hope people are getting it. So how do I compute 2 with 3, 5? Go there to the data point. Correct. 2 with 3, 5. 2 with 3, right? And 2 with 5. 2 with 3 is what? 7, right? And 2 with 5 is 10. 7, 10. What is the maximum? 10. Go there. That is why I would have put 10. This is very critical step here, right? I hope people are, you will have to keep merging, and eventually, what is the best case you can stop? You will reach the top where there's only one overall cluster itself, right? So I think I have what explained the real math interest, right? The cluster center update and all. But I think this output is of interest here, right? The bottom plot you refer at or you look at, right? This is typically in a clustering circle referred as a dendrogram. Okay, right? What is the meaning here? See, plotted the y-axis is the height of the clustering here, right? How many data points are you grouping? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay. 5 data points I had. The first step I did was to do merge 3 and 5, right? So 3, 5 I merged. The meaning of the height is there are 2 elements in the cluster so far. Then what did you do? 3, 5, right? Actually, is more closer to the next step. 2 and 4 would have been close. Are people getting it? So after your distance matrix, okay, this is the final update here. Which is the smallest distance here? So 0 I will take, that is ruled out. 5, right? So what is that element? 2, 4. So 2, 4 will go into one cluster. That is why I'm grouping 2, 4 into one or merging 2, 4 and 1, right? And then if you look at the distance, you have to update it. I don't have that matrix there. You have to do it. That merged 2, 4 matrix will be closer to the first data point. So that is why 2, 4 gets grouped to 1. Right? And then eventually the last 2 clusters get merged to 1. So what is the advantage of this dendrogram approach? You can get the result at or varying case here. Right? Now I am interested only in k equal to 2. Just look at the k equal to 2, k equal to 4. Next slide, I think I will show a splicing single linkage. There are different ways to compute the single linkage is there, average linkage is there, complete linkage is there, right? I took the maximum, right? That was complete. If you take the minimum, it is single. If you take the average, it is the minimum, the maximum is average. Okay, right? Let's not waste the next slide. This is the beauty about dendrograms, right? Where you splice it, you can get a differing. You have the output for varying number of k's from the process itself. I want it for k equal to 3, k equal to 4. Then accordingly draw the line, right? If you draw the line around the height of around 4, whatever it is, right? 4.8 or something you call, right? If you, the left curve I'm meaning, right? That red splicing I do, then if you look at it, the overall data set is actually viewed as 2 clusters. This bottom group is 1, and then the right group is 1. The same cluster, let's say you draw the line a bit down. right? Then the way you see it is, the left is one cluster, 2 and 4 are two different clusters. Are people getting it? For the right Venn program, K is equal to 3. Okay, next. Okay, I think I have possibly exposed you to Santosh. You can quickly open that. Uh, Santosh, when was your session? 11:59. 11. Yeah, yeah.
11:45.
I think I have
45.
15 minutes. After that, I'll give you. Yeah, yeah. So 15 minutes is there, right? Okay, just for the interested audience, right? There is something called DB scan. There is something called as Clarence. These are all advanced approaches to clustering. Okay, DB means density-based scanning here, right? Can I look at, is a cluster getting equally populated? Because what you also don't want to happen is, right, one cluster is getting 80 records, the other cluster is getting only 2 records, right? Uh, they came up with algorithms which actually distributes the density uniformly across clusters, right? Uh, one mole is there, or sometimes you can pass it one mole, right? In the test drive, Python, they can show some alternate packages. But then there are a lot of research issues with your hierarchical itself, right? The distance computation is a really tedious exercise. I think eventually, for the interested audience, right, hierarchical clustering algorithm, the k-means clustering algorithm, these all will be of n-cube complexity, which is really too time complex. There are subtle tricks we play to bring down the complexity, but I can't touch that here. At the Bayesian session you open here. So at least I give them the essence because they have been taught how to test it. Let them be aware of the basics. Not more than 15 minutes there. You will get a break from 11:30 to 11:45. Okay, right? Maximize. Sorry. That again, you are taking us to you call it as a supervised learning session, right? Supervised learning session is finished. This is a that incremental update to your classification discussion. Okay, right? I think class would see the real benefit, right? With your decision tree, one of the real problems is if I add one more record, or let's say if I add 5 more records, right? 5 more new records are coming in the training data set, you say. Then your entire tree needs to get updated, right? Because it is based on, because these 5 more records will also have the role to play in the majority voting. They may shift the split values, right? So decision tree is not good for incremental learning. Okay, right? Sir, what's the good textbook or resource or mathematical part? Could you please help me out? Excellent question. My suggestion would be I know it is from a student exposure point of view. You want your students to get exposed. Excellent question. Mining massive data sets, right? Ullman, I regard it as the Bible of. He may not call it as data mining and all, but that is good from exposing you to the technique and the mathematical flair as well. Right? In fact, this order of n cube and all I talked, right, is excellent there. If you want what good exhaustive mathematical discussions along with the technique, then I will recommend this. But if you are interested in a balanced mix between implementation and algorithms, right, then I will recommend Alan Campbell. Alan Campbell, yes, he will mention the complexities, right? Mathematical analysis is there, but I think I will rate Ullman good on the complexities or what the theory of behind algorithms more. Ullman basically is a compiler design person, right? So that is the reason it comes. Han is more of a pure computer scientist, computer science engineering person, right? I generally follow both the textbook for my courses, right? A priori and all is very good in Han. Okay. So I will recommend you follow both textbooks for your courses. Good, right? So I'll quickly go through Bayes algorithm. At least the need for it, I have pitched it, right? Can I do with a different approach? It will not be so much time taking to learn the decision tree all over again. That's a really what training exercise, right? Next slide. So the basic for Bayesian classifier, right? It comes out from the Bayes theorem in mathematics here, right? The total probability theorem. I'll connect it the classification there. Okay, look at the bottom second equation I have. Probability of H conditioned on X. Okay, right? Is expressed is equal to probability of X conditioned on H. It is a reverse, right? Into probability of H divided by probability of X. Okay, I think that equal to is what is coming out as a minus. Please see it as an equal to here. Okay, right? Just to connect with an, I'm not going with the derivation connection with the Bayes theorem and all. Let's interpret it. What I see it here is X is a training sample. X is the evidence. Right? X is a training sample. H is a hypothesis I'm making. Right? H is a hypothesis. A hypothesis is what in a classification exercise? Prediction, right? So this is literally testing. Your H condition on X is actually the testing phase, right? Are you people getting it? What is the hypothesis? That a test record belongs to class 1, or a test record belongs to class 2, test record belongs to class 3. These are the various hypotheses, right? So probability that the hypothesis holds true given the sample is what? Yeah, there. Probability of X conditioned on H, which means what? Probability of the sample condition on the hypothesis, right? That I have the training record, okay? Into probability of the hypothesis divided by probability of the X was my evidence, okay? So I've given you an interpretation of the Bayesian theorem with the classification notations. I'll go to the trace. Next slide. Oh, see, the left side probability, they will call it posterior probability. The Santosh, you can point. H condition on X is called as the posterior probability. The X condition on H probability is called as the prior probability here, right? Given probability, predict the probability. That's right. The bottom slides. Look at the slides patiently, right? I will quickly tell you how to trace it and understand. Go there. I think you can go to my sample here. The same sample I should have. Right? This was a decision tree sample you took, right? Right. So same thing. Let's see how a Bayesian classifier will approach. 10 more minutes. I get fine. Two classes of interest. So my CI in the equation that you have are now only C1, C2. Is either yes or no, right? And let's say the test record I'm getting is this. X I'm getting that is a test record. Age is less than 30, income is medium, student is yes, and credit rating is equal to 5. So what should I do now for this test record? What should I do? Somebody can ping me on the chat. Given this test record, what should I do? Excellent. Hypothesis. Okay, I type that. Given my test record, what should I? If it is decision tree, you will just pass this decision tree, or you will pass this test record to layer by layer and then generate the class label, right? Generate the class label, not using a decision tree, but using a Bayesian classifier. Okay, so I have to say whether it belongs to C1 or C2. Next slide. This is all about probability computations here, right? First step, what you do, compute the overall class probabilities, right? Out of the 14 samples, there were 9 records belonging to the yes category and 5 records belonging to the no category, right? So probability of C1 is 0.643 and probability of C2 is 0.357. Next, what am I doing? You see, this is the hypothesis, right? The bottom is hypothesis you make here. Okay. Look at the bottom. Santosh, you can point at the bottom two probabilities. Next. Probability. What is this X? Test record, right? What is the actually in testing? What I'm interested. The test record. Let's say you want to say he belongs to class C1, right? Then that would be dependent on the right side we had in the Bayes theorem is H condition on X was the left side, right side was X condition on H, right? So what is that? H is given, it belongs to yes and no, right? So what am I doing here? In the data set you have, right? Look at age less than or equal to 30 samples, count them, which are of type Bayes computer. Yes, right? Are you people getting it? Out of 9 yes samples, there are 2 samples that belong to age less than or equal to 30 category, right? And there are 3 samples that belong to the no category. Are you people? This is the classification computing probabilities here. Have you got it? Why so many probabilities? For each data point with respect to hypothesis, you have to calculate. Hypothesis is a given training data set, right? I'm again typing it for your benefit because the whole basis is probability of H condition on X is the testing phase, right? And what was hypothesis I'm doing? That the record, input test record belongs to class 1. And what am I saying? On the right side, I will drag an X condition on H because my training data set is given, right? So that means H is available. What that it is, whether it is C1 or C2, that is what I'm doing. Santosh, you can point out that the larger probability measures above, right? Next, the computation. Income is equal to medium. Income is equal to medium. That was coming to this point. Income, medium, and C1 sample or Bayes computer. There are 9 yes samples, out of which income is equal to medium is 4. So 4 by 9. And there are 5 samples, out of which 2 or income medium. So 2 by 5. Similarly, do it for all task relevant attributes, right? For student category, right? It is 6 by 9 and 1 by 5. And credit rating is 6 by 9 and 2 by 5. Are you getting this probability computation? Right? Then what should I do? Take all the S probabilities. Which S probabilities I mean? Bayes computer is equal to S, right? 0.44, 0.667, 0.22 I left, sorry. That is what I'm doing in this step here. Group all the S class probabilities, multiply it, right? 0.044. Similarly, do it for the no probabilities. No is not the student rating at all, it is a class no, right? And then scale them 0.044 and 0.019, multiply it with the respect to overall class probabilities. Okay. What was that? 0.643 and 0.357. So for the yes case, multiply it with 0.643. For the no case, multiply it with 0.357. Right? The final result, whichever is the higher probability, that is a predicted class. Okay, so I think the what benefit or the beauty about Bayesian classifier is new records, right? It is just going through the motion quickly, right? Whereas decision trees are really computation intensive because the convergence may take time. Here, the convergence is not an issue, but too many probabilities to compute. But I think that most of your powerful computers can. Still, Bayesian classifier is famous, right? You have Bayesian belief networks, multinomial Bayesian, many powerful classifiers based on Bayes have come. Okay, right? Next slide. Just one question I'll ask you to ponder, right? Is there any limitation of the Bayesian classifier? Let's say, early slide, if one of the sub probabilities, right? What do I mean by sub probabilities? Age less than or equal to 30. Sir, kindly describe statistics testing clustering, right? See, I think that's what statistics test now you are meaning my test or what? Okay, I'll finish this and then Kamlesh, I'll remember your name, right? I'll ask towards the end, right? test. The confusion is whether you are meaning my test or in the similarity matrix. Text, I think sure. Okay, you can bring on the chart. I'll go through. See, one issue with this Bayesian classifier is that is what we call the Laplacian correction. The problem is if one of the sub probabilities, right? You multiply 0.22, sometimes you can point there. 0.222, 0.444, 0.667, and that multiplication equation will come. Product of sub probabilities it is, right? In that, let's say it is theoretically possible that one of the sub probabilities becomes zero, right? Because that data point may not exist. What is the problem? Even if one such data point is not there, rest of all the other probabilities, their effect is almost, it's not almost, it gets reduced to a zero. Correct, right? Zero into anything. Just all can be maximal, but because one data point did not belong to any of the classes we had, or even one of the classes we had, that can reduce the entire class's probability to a zero from a prediction perspective, right? And then your classifier will simply keep saying the other class. Okay, that is what we do. If you Bayesian classifier cannot work if you have zero probability scenarios, you have to insert or do data augmentation. Okay, next step, and this is the slide here where I will insert. That is up where you do the statistics, right? Where is I think in that case, right? If my let's say age is becoming zero, right? Then there are three possible values for age in my data set, right? So let me not insert only one age value. Let me distribute it uniformly. Three new records I will insert it. So that is why I'm increasing the sample from 1000 to 1003, right? And at least it should belong to C1 and C2 both, because you don't want any one probability to become zero. Okay, right? But then this is called as a Laplacian correction here, right? How do I correct the zero probability problem? Insert probabilities or insert records so that at least a very negligible probability comes in into my Bayesian modeler. Okay. Next step, is there anything on Bayesian? Next. Yeah. I'm not going to teach that. If you want to, and the other problem with Bayesian classifier, right? It assumes conditional class independence. What does it mean? You took individual attributes, you just collectively multiplied it, right? But what was the effect of age and income, right? That is what, right? You assumed one attribute's effect on the class as independent of the other attribute's effect on the class, right? But in real life, I think this is the example they give in the health sector, right? Somebody's lifestyle will have a dependence on whether he'll become cancerous or not, right? So his past lifestyle habits, his food habits, right? So if you want this dependency to be established across nodes, right? I'll give the name, you go and pick it if people are interested. A more powerful conditional class dependent based classifier is what we call as Bayesian belief networks. That is extensive here, right? So I will stop there, but that's what the essence I'm talking about. Next slide. Next slide. No, not here. Didn't I mention about Bayesian belief networks? Okay. That lung problem here. Next slide. Next slide. Next. Diseases and all, right? This is where I'm. The base. It is called as. The base which we taught, right, is called as a naive base. Why? It makes a naive, very basic assumption that it will satisfy conditional class independence. Income, age with respect to C1, income with respect to C1, that is the way we saw. We never saw age and income together with respect to C1, right? But that will come to have an effect in real life. If you want to do such things, then Bayesian belief networks come. This is what I said: profile, age, family history, right? Lung cancer, right? His lifestyle habit of whether he's a smoker or not, right? All this stuff will have. Chapter 9 of Hannon Campbell. Okay, Bayesian belief networks is depth. Is what at depth there, right? Okay, I'll wind up my session. 15-minute break you get. you can take a break. People who want to take a break, you can break. Santosh, you can even stop the recording.